Welcome to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila. We have our co-host here, Andrei. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me again.
We have a special guest in the studio, Mr. Dan Weiner from Small Housing VC. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Nice to see you again.
Yes, like we go way back. We've all kind of worked together in this industry. Dan was a major role, the executive director for the Okanagan Housing CHBA.
Yeah, it's like 18 words long. So.
Right?
The Canadian Home Builders Association, Central Okanagan.
Thank you. I stumbled around putting those all together. He did a wonderful job there, a major resource for all of the builders and developers in town to help communicate our needs and challenges we're having through municipal and provincial levels. So it's no surprise that you got snapped up by a wonderful provincial program that is driving small housing, essential infill housing, which we've talked a lot about on this show, in BC.
Yeah, knocked it right out of the park. It's an idea that's treated like a new idea, but really when you think about it, it's how we've built housing for ages, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone complains about infill and what it's doing to a community, and then they go to Montreal and they love stacked triplexes. Yeah, and then they go to New York and Boston and they love brownstone townhomes. But if it's in their community, it's going to tear the fabric of our society apart. So we're just trying to restore something that we've been doing for decades.
And I love how you reference those other cities, because I think what really happens is that very few people can actually visualize things. Like I think there's some stat that 20% of the population are actually visual thinkers and can see. So if you're being talked about 3 houses or 3-4 homes on a property, if you're not a visual thinker, it could be very hard to understand what that's going to be, and people can instantly shut down things that they might be fearful of or not know.
Totally. Yeah. You guys are both elder millennials. So like I
very elder millennial.
Yeah, generous. I kind of equate NIMBYism, people who say not in my backyard, with the same people who opposed like when a MySpace layout changes or when the Facebook layout changed multiple times.
Yeah.
I think they're just resistant to change in general because they don't understand the benefits. They don't understand why things are changing, and nobody's giving them proper communication. So when we talk about infill development and new home construction is not only a way to keep our economy running, but a way to create more environmentally friendly and more sustainable homes, a way to unlock generational wealth for future generations of Canadians. Mm-hmm. It checks so many boxes, and the argument gets lost at what about my parking spot? And that's just way too simple.
Right. Yeah. And especially when we're all going to be sharing a car share program in the future of cars that just drive themselves around, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we've seen some crazy stuff even, and we can get into the weeds later, but there's an architecture firm out of London, Ontario that's saying we need to redesign single-family neighborhoods to have a community parking lot in the middle of a subdivision, because in a world of autonomous and self-driving cars, why couldn't your car bring you to your home and then go and park itself?
Yeah.
As soon as that need is met, then we can totally think about how we redesign communities, and people are just fearful of change rather than trying new things.
And I have to say, like, it's a nice balance, because if there wasn't people who were fearful of change, the people that are not fearful of change would run full speed ahead into the brick wall, right? So it is a nice balance of making sure we have crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's as we move forward as a community. So I think it takes a balance of both. But you absolutely hit on two things that we have talked about on many episodes. And one, all of the changes for single-family home bylaws and what you now can put on single-family home properties in the different municipalities is like every single-family home owner essentially has won the lottery.
Yep.
And there's definitely a way you can tap into creating generational housing and generational wealth on your own property. And then the other thing that you talked about was densifying within the cities means, and we've referenced this as upcycling infrastructure, right? Like this sprawl, this keep cutting down masses of trees and blowing out sides of mountain and extending that water pipe farther and farther, and these multi-million-dollar pump stations and all the things that come with continuing to sprawl. This is the natural cycle of cities. Larger cities you go into, as you mentioned, you see triplexes, fourplexes on inner city lots that used to be single family home lots, and that is utilizing infrastructure that's already there, upgrading the infrastructure that desperately needs to be upgraded in that process so that you can continue to build a strong community.
Absolutely. I also think the piece that I would add to that is that it's a consideration of what type of housing we want to get built in our communities in the first place, right? So when Kelowna had its election, it was very clear that people were sick of building vertically to the sky. They did not like skyscrapers for invasions of privacy or perceived invasions of privacy. They don't like the idea of a very tall structure being a block from their single family home. So if that's the case, how do we create more housing for our residents, more housing? The secret's out on Kelowna, right? Everyone wants to move here. Everyone wants to relocate, and we're happy to have people. And you can't just say we're closed, because if you say we're closed, you're going to displace so many basement suite renters that maybe their wages have not grown and accelerated with everybody else. Gentle density fourplexes, triplexes, tiny homes, accessory dwelling units, townhouses, they provide a solution that is affordable, more affordable than a single family home. It gives you ground oriented access, which you don't get out of a condo. It probably has lower strata or condo fees in that type of a way as well. And in many cases, the research and the data that we've generated has showcased that this isn't about developers getting rich. Like, a developer cannot buy a lot in Kelowna and create a viable fourplex or a sixplex. Who's most likely to benefit in these projects is the person who's lived in Kelowna for 30 years. They bought their home for maybe $79,000 in Rutland. It's now worth $800,000. And now they can create maybe, the Rutland 2300 level buy split, two levels of stairs.
I call it the 80s box house.
So like a 75-year-old should not be living with that many stairs. So what a great time for them to create an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard that's one floor. They get ground level access. They get their autonomy, their privacy, and their independence. Maybe their kids move into the unit on the front, and they're able to raise a family in that larger house while taking care of their parents. And even in the lower mainland where small housing is based, we've seen 4 generations of family living on a single family lot now. I mean, what kind of social fabric are we actually building? It's fantastic. It's probably the most viable alternative as far as what we build for housing while managing our infrastructure costs. And it doesn't get nearly the love and respect that it should, because it's the closest thing we have to a silver bullet to dealing with our housing crisis, if we can help builders scale up.
Well, and it's also, it's just thinking about how we typically do transition through our life and move to different places in a different way. And we've talked a lot about downsizing differently, which is exactly what you touched on. People struggle with getting their parents to sell the house and get rid of all the stuff and move into a smaller place because they love their neighborhood. They live there forever. It's not. It is about having a place for the grandchildren to come home, but it's also, they know their grocery store. They know their coffee shop. They go and get their gas from the same place. They walk and they see Merle walking the dog every day and they give a wave, and that's important to them. And so now this has opened up the door to create that space in your backyard. And an 800 square foot 2-bedroom condo is probably not going to suffice for a 3,500 square foot split level, but a 1,200 square foot 2-bedroom in the backyard with their own little garden shed. That could work out very nicely. So it's opened this door to create housing of your own dreams in your own neighborhood, create generational wealth, have a place. Maybe your kids and grandkids move in. Maybe it's a family that is looking for housing that moves in. I know we talk about being your kids and that kind of thing, but sometimes chosen family is even better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much in there, and it's just that gentle density represents such an elegant solution overall. I mean, we want to live in established neighborhoods. We want to live in established communities. Nobody likes living next to new construction in general. So when we continue to scale out, and as you guys kind of mentioned in the intro, like, we're adding pipes, we're adding lights, we're adding sidewalks. It means more park development. It also means property taxes are going to increase, which is something else people really want to keep low. And despite the fact that British Columbia has the lowest property taxes in Canada and Kelowna has the 3rd lowest property taxes in all of British Columbia, if we're going to keep that where it is, we really need to get behind gentle density and infill as a viable solution. So the more people we can take from going, I love this type of housing, I love building our community, I do think we have a housing shortage and I want to create more housing solutions, I just don't think it should go in my community. I just don't think it should go in the Mission. I just don't think it should go in Pandosy. Those are the people that we need to say, you could, rather than resisting this change, you could actually be part of the solution. You could make some money. You could provide housing for family members or people that you care about. You could host international students if you wanted to go there. You could create housing that's going to be more environmentally friendly because of all of the other code and legislation that's been added to this. There's just so many check boxes that gentle density can fill for the average resident, and we don't take nearly enough advantage of that. So as we get into bylaws and everything, I'm excited to talk about how we can accelerate these solutions and how people can get involved and be a part of it and take advantage of all of this new zoning and standardized designs and everything that's come online. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's such a long way to go.
Well, one thing you also touched on there is if you believe there's a housing crisis. Now, some people may not right now. There's a lot of inventory for sale.
Much inventory.
What's the housing crisis? We're going to talk about those numbers for BC next. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila. We have our co-host today, Mr. Andrei. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. And we have a wonderful guest in the studio today, Mr. Dan Weiner from Small Housing BC.
Hi.
We are talking about infill development. If you've been paying attention to the shows, we do talk a lot about this, about the generational wealth that can be created from redeveloping your property. But the big thing is that we do have I hate saying housing crisis, but
it is a crisis. So I'll say it. We have a housing crisis.
Okay, Dan, roll with it.
Take it and run.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can, we'll look at realtor data and we'll talk about the number of listings coming online and the pace they're selling at and days listed. The fact of the matter is, across Canada, we have a shortage of 5.8 million homes. That needs to get
today?
built. That's today.
Okay.
It might be slightly adjusted now that we've changed our immigration strategy.
Sure.
But let's call it, we have millions of homes we need to get built.
Okay.
In BC alone, we need to build 450,000 homes between now, 2025, and 2030. 450,000 homes. So that's about 80,000 homes a year.
Okay.
That's the context.
Okay, well, that's the whole province, 80,000.
80,000 doesn't sound too scary, except for the fact when you take into account that British Columbia had 45,000 building permits issued last year.
Ooh.
So, and that's still close to record highs. It's a little bit of a drop off, but that's with builders running flat out. We've created 45,000. So what does that mean? Well, this is where that past experience from the Canadian Home Builders Association comes in. There's about 2,300 builders licenses across BC, and the average builder is a mom and pop builder, Jamila, this doesn't apply to you, but typically dad's on the site, mom's running the books. Jamila, we know you're the boss, and Andrei, you're running the things in the background.
We've got a little reverse role.
Yeah, exactly. Challenging gender norms, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But the average BC home builder builds about 2 to 4 homes a year because we've been building everything on site and we've been building everything custom.
Okay.
We now need to ask pretty much every single builder in British Columbia to double their output, and that's after everybody running flat out, hair straight back for the last 4 to 5 years. And it's still not enough. So whether it's getting more builders and getting more tradespeople to British Columbia, but then if you do that, where do you put them? Where are they going to live? Where are they going to pay rent?
We need more houses.
So we need more houses. So and this is where small housing comes in. And this is why we believe it's such an elegant solution, because it allows one crew to work on one job site, creating multiple homes at once. So, if you think of a modular and an offsite kind of construction facility, and we should really go there at some point in time, you have one crew, or let's call it a structure, rotating, and the crew moves around, and you can have like forming and framing, then you can get it to drywall, then you can do your fixtures and ship it to site, whatever it is. This would allow essentially the same thing. Let's go pour a slab in the back. Well, people are still living in the front home and there's a minimal disruption. Then we can frame this one up and we can move to lot number 2 or subdivided lot number 2 and start the process there while the framing crew is working on the slab that's been poured. So it offers an economy of scale that is more elegant than, let's say, building 16-story, 24-story towers where that crew is going to be pulled away for 2 years at a time to bring those units online. We think that gentle density is probably a more equitable solution when we think about small and medium businesses. So if you are a listener and you're going, this is all about the greedy developer that wants to make money, I would exclusively challenge that in the single family home development from what I've seen. These are people that are trying to make a living and pay for college for their kids.
Yeah.
Like, let's and when we dispel that, giving those people the opportunity to scale up their businesses in British Columbia is such a profound economic opportunity for all of us. We all stand to gain with all of that money coming back into the system.
I also believe that there is nothing that supports your local Canadian economy more than building a home. Like, if you really want to prioritize fueling your local economy, building a home will do that. We did one show on
going through all the different trades.
How many trades and suppliers you coordinate.
Yep.
It was over 69 different companies and businesses you're engaging with in building that home. Yes, there are materials that come from other countries. That is probably a whole nother show. But the work, the labor, the people. You say BC is filled with ma and pa builders that are hiring ma and pa painters and ma and pa framers, and it's a cluster of small businesses creating an industry together.
100%. And let's call out the date here. We're talking about this inside of a Canada, America, will they, won't they tariff drama, right?
Right.
Like, we are a very resource-rich country, and BC is one of the most resource-rich provinces in Canada. So we have the lumber to build these products, this housing for people. We have the window and the glass companies as well to help us finish off the structure on the outside. Yes, we're going to pay a little bit more for quartz. We're going to pay a little bit more for the interior finishes and those pieces. But when it comes to building structures that can house people, we have everything we need here. What a great way to stimulate our economy in the midst of economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
What a great way to support, as you've mentioned, whether you're Canadian or a new Canadian, I don't really care about that. But you're supporting people that live here, that work here, that spend money here, that walk down on Bernard and they go shopping, or they go to Orchard Plaza, or they want to take their family out to Skinny Duke's or B&A or something like that. Like, this is money that comes into the economy and is fiercely local.
Yeah.
And the more we can support that, the better.
Absolutely. So, huge housing need. We need to. I'm having a panic attack thinking I have to do double the amount of structures that we have in the past, to be honest with you. But in order to fill this need, now I'm in this every day with people, and I would love to just hit the ground running building houses. And I'm talking to homeowners that want to put a carriage home, want to build a garage and put a 2-bedroom suite and have it pay for itself with the rental income. They want to do this. Is there anything coming down the pipeline financially? Because that's where, in my world, that's where it gets held up.
Not only is there stuff coming down the pipeline financially, there's already stuff that exists financially.
Whoa. Spill the beans, Dan.
Yeah. So I don't know how much business I'm also simultaneously going to take away from some of your partners here, Jamila, but let's go for a ride. So
Okay.
First off, in September, it got lost in the election fray. The BC government released standardized housing designs. So from a single family home or an ADU all the way up to a fourplex, you can download those documents from the British Columbia government for free, bring those to a builder and say, I want to build this. Can you help me? That is a fantastic start that removes the architects, the building designers, and the thousands of dollars in friction on that piece.
So those are building plans?
Those are building plans.
Construction ready.
Construction ready, fully costed, etc.
On
Wonderful.
the British, the provincial website, British Columbia website.
Yeah, and different municipalities across British Columbia are also introducing their own designs. So, for example, Kelowna is a little bit more hilly than Chilliwack.
Yes.
So we need to have housing designs that respond to a contextual environment. So Burnaby is one of Kelowna was actually the first back in the summer to release some of these designs, and you guys were involved in some partner projects there. And Burnaby is one of the most recent ones. We're also going to see designs coming out from CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, about 10 different designs that should be released sometime in the spring, pending whatever happens with elections. So step one, we've got our designs done. Step two, municipalities are working on fast tracks to be able to expedite these building permits. In Kelowna, we are actually one of the fastest in Canada, but we need other municipalities to follow our lead and take what Kelowna's done and continue to improve upon it.
Yeah.
The other piece that's really important is that the BC government through BC Housing has introduced a secondary suite loan, and there will be one coming from the Canadian government as well. So $40,000 from your provincial government, $40,000 from your federal government that are totally forgivable. So this is $80,000 in free money. if you rent the unit for less than the average market rate as determined by the city when they release their housing needs report.
And
so if you want to rent it to your kids, if you want to rent that unit for $750, you could have $80,000 in free government money to support you building that accessory dwelling unit in your backyard.
Okay, and you had said suite off the top. So is this adding a suite into the existing house, or is this adding another house in the backyard?
I hope if you guys have a fact check, and I encourage anybody to go and check out these programs afterwards, I believe it's as long as you're adding a new unit.
Okay.
Okay.
Now let's be
Are you
crystal.
taking notes, Andrei?
Let's
Yes,
be
I'm
crystal
taking
clear there
notes.
too, though, right? Like that's maybe enough to pay for your municipal, provincial, and federal
Sure.
taxes.
Yeah.
But it's still a head start when you factor in what the cost for square foot of build is in the hundreds of dollars, right? Every little bit helps.
But that is the hurdle to get started, and we're going to talk more about that hurdle to get started and how this can actually be an answer to it as soon as we come back from the break. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila. I've got my co-host, Andrei, here with me today.
Hello.
And a special guest in the studio, Mr. Dan Weiner from Small Housing BC. We are talking about infill development, and we've been all over the map today. We've talked about the housing crisis. We've talked some numbers that builders out there have to double the amount of homes they need to create in a year over the next 5 years just to come close to achieving that need. And that's not going to happen overnight. We've talked about financing challenges and how, BC really sees homeowners like yourselves out there with single family homes that have now been given this densification and adding backyard homes and adding duplexes in the backyard, whether that be for family members or chosen family members. In our opinion, my opinion, I don't want to make this your guys' opinion too, but creating generational wealth for your family and also monthly cash flow for your family. So there's a lot of great opportunities out there. But we work with a lot of people doing this. And the big hurdle is getting started, paying that initial cash to get the plans and figure out what's going in the plans and figure out what the municipality engineering department is going to tell you what you need to do so that you can really budget out this project and understand what you need to spend to do it. And Dan, you opened up Pandora's box by letting us know that there is some government funding out there, provincial, federal, $40,000 from each of those, potentially grants, forgivable loans from the government that you can be using towards creating these projects. We're going to dig way more into those websites, Andrei, hey, and we'll talk more about that on another show for sure. But we want to keep picking your brain, Dan. So on the break, we were talking prefab and the movement it's making. Now, the history has shown it does cost more to do prefab than stick frame. And you cut me off and you said it won't soon. So let's talk about the history of prefab.
For sure. So I think if you talked, and you've probably had guests on the show before that have talked to this, but there was a point in time not so long ago in the 50s and 60s in that post-war boom where if I wanted to get a house, I could order it from a Sears catalog and you can get your design. I mean, even Home Hardware has like a collection of homes like that you can get ordered and assembled on site.
Yeah.
And then we kind of paid less attention to housing, or we had hit critical mass on our population, and then everything became custom. So we're building on site, we're tailoring it to you, it's bespoke, especially in Kelowna, super bespoke everything. And now that we're dealing with our population challenges, and one thing we could have talked about earlier is right-sizing our homes. So let's talk about 2,800 square foot homes in Black Mountain that are lived in by two people with a declining birth rate.
Right.
Different type of conversation. But now we need to get to homes that are meant for smaller families that are more likely to have less kids. So prefab and modular is offering quite an elegant solution for this. So yes, right now it costs more. We don't have a ton of facilities. They're still done relatively custom for clients in the case in Kelowna, like a Chaparral, or there's workforce housing in the cases of places like SRI. But where modular is going to go, in my opinion, and we see the federal government talking about this and the provincial government talking about this, is buying a house of parts. So modular has been known as, let's get the 20-foot long, put it on the back of the truck, ship the whole unit, crane it onto the slab. what if you flat packed all of those elements down and you built your house like an IKEA product? What if it was, let's screw part L into part M, and we're even going to hand you your tools to do it?
Right.
That is where the world of modular housing is going, and that is why the government is creating these standardized designs that we talked about in the last segment. So you get the legislation in place from BC with Bill 44, check. Now we have the playground. Then you offer the standardized designs and the financing. We've hit this piece of the funnel. The next piece is scaling up the industry. And I think you're going to see a substantial investment from the federal government in particular, regardless of which party is ruling at the end of the day. Everyone wants to stimulate the economy.
Yep.
And when those modular facilities start getting brought online, look out. That's where building is really, really going to change. And we are seeing tens of millions of dollars, and it's scalable. It's quick. It offers 365-day year-round work. We're in the middle of a cold snap right now. Trades workers aren't out on the site today.
Right.
But if we were working inside of controlled facilities, what does that do for our trades workers? What does that do for the educational institutions that are creating these trades workers and training them? There's just so much more opportunity. It's also in an infill environment, less of a nuisance to the neighbors. Nobody likes framing going up next to them. But if it was assembled in under 6 hours, which is what we see in the Lower Mainland with companies like Nykun Contracting and B Collective, then it's a lot more palatable for the community.
Right.
So I think modular is going, right now it's not cheaper. Right now it is faster, and that's the benefit.
Yep.
That's the key, is the speed.
So you get your speed. Soon you're going to get your economies of scale on the finance side, and it's less of a nuisance to the neighborhood. I am very, very bullish on the world of modular and offsite.
And so these modular homes that are being created, are they coming complete? Are they coming to a drywall stage? Do they have drywall on them? What are we seeing, or what could we see in the future for these?
I think you're going to see a couple of things. One, I think you can see panels where they could still do the insulation on site if you wanted that amount of control.
Okay.
But I toured Munich and I toured Vienna in the fall last year. We have seen everything from pre-insulated walls and then drywall done on site to the world of a bathroom pod with a wet wall on one side and a mechanical wall on the other side that are dropped into a modular unit. So
Gotcha.
basically it serves as the
Cool.
heart of the home. It connects to everything and powers everything.
Right.
But then it means one crew can work on a bathroom and the sink and the kitchen in one area,
Yep.
while the other crew is framing in the other side. And on day 3, we bring it all together. So everything gets a little bit faster, which is going to be a massive boon as far as cost is concerned for the consumer.
Well, time is money, right? Like when you're borrowing money from the bank for your construction loan to put a house together, that's interest that's happening every month, right? So there's an offset there. And the reason why prefab hasn't just completely been eliminated from the market, because it is a choice to pay more, but you're prepping your site while the house is being built somewhere else. Right. And then it comes and it arrives and it's put together, and you can typically take a 1-year build to 3 months.
Totally.
And so that's where the appeal is there. Now, if you can get costing in line, which I love that you hit on where we've gone with houses. Early in the show, I said the 80s box house. Like that house is everywhere. And 90s, you can tell it was built because it's slightly different and it has pink stucco on it. And then we just went crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and a lot of that was the industrial world of choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's part of it. And another part is that all levels of government got out of housing for a considerable amount of time. So, and I'll segue a little bit here. And this is why small housing exists, is to find the gaps that are not being addressed that will allow all of these housing solutions to accelerate. So even in the world of modular housing, construction finance doesn't work like a stick built, because where do you insure the home? When it's on the truck from the facility to the lot, banks don't want to fund that. So the construction draw is different. They're not willing to secure the product when it's in one spot versus another. So there's innovative finance products that need to come out. We need to totally review what's going on with OFSI, which is the federal financial regulators. We need to do the same thing at the BC level with the credit unions to allow them to create new housing products that align with this new legislative mandate and where housing is going.
And this is happening, right? Like these are conversations.
These are the conversations we are in right now. So we're working with groups like Van City. We're working with groups like RBC. We're working with Beam Credit Union here to help advise and understand the problems, so that we can go and talk to the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Finance, et cetera, to help move these solutions forward in some kind of productive way.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
I did not think I was going to get this kind of information today because, like, you as the little guy over here just trying to make things happen for people, like, you just hit walls everywhere you go. With, you come up with a great plan that has a good business plan towards it. Like, you got enough bedrooms and you can generate enough rent so that you can figure out how to get it financed, and then bam, you hit another financing wall because they've just changed from 80% loan to value to 60% loan to value on your rental rates and stuff like that. And like, it's just always feels like you have to use so many different industries to create housing, and it always feels like they're just kind of like working against you a little bit all the way around. So what I'm hearing is Small Housing BC, which has been around since 2012, has been advocating this. I feel like I need to be on Small Housing BC.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're a builder, a developer listening to this right now, I would highly encourage you to check out smallhousing.org. We produce a number of policy papers and position papers that explain where we have come from, what the hurdles are, and where we are going. And then, basically we write a policy paper so that we have an excuse to interact with the Ministry of Housing and say, this is what needs to happen. And 9 times out of 10, those policy papers get adopted and they turn into legislative change. So if you're a builder, a developer, and you're coming up with hardships, we want to hear it. If you want to use our resources, we have a whole gentle density toolkit, standardized designs, pre-approved designs. But if you just want to be part of the conversation, I encourage you to reach out to our organization because we want to continue pushing the envelope as far as we can.
We got to take a quick break, but we could talk and talk and talk and talk and talk anyway. We're going to take a break and we'll talk more when we come back. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila, with my co-host, Andrei, and our special guest here today from Small Housing BC, Dan. Thank you for coming.
Thanks again for having me, guys.
We have talked about a ton of stuff today, a lot of stuff that we've touched on this show throughout the last year, all around infill development, the opportunities of redeveloping your property. We got a gold mine from Dan of some provincial and federal grants up to $80,000 that homeowners can be taking advantage of for redeveloping their property. Andrei and I are going to dig into more information about that. We'll talk about that again on the show. Small Housing BC is a government-funded organization that's been operating since 2012 that has been creating resources for builders and individuals to develop their land and add small housing into their backyard. This is a huge initiative that is being seen as one of the tools to solve our housing crisis that we have in our country. And what they want to do is just really educate everyday people on how they can create housing, whether that be for their family members or chosen family members, a new home for themselves, and how they can also create generational wealth. So smallhousingbc.org has a lot of information on there for the citizen developer or for builders developers that want more information, want more resources. They have been a resource and behind the rezoning of single-family homes across BC as a way to help the housing crisis. They are on the forefront of conversations with the government on financing, lending, new building policies, new building standards. This is so wonderful to hear from our position where you do face a lot of challenges trying to create these homes for people. We've talked about so much today. We have a big summit coming up, Dan, right?
Yeah. So every year we host something called the Gentle Density Summit.
Okay.
And this is actually coming up on February 25th in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. So historically, this has been about bringing together the planner community from more of a policy perspective because we've been waiting for these houses to legalize. It took longer to legalize fourplexes than it did to legalize weed. It's nuts. But we've been focused on planners historically, but now that the legislation is in place and the municipalities have implemented it, we are turning all of our attention to industry and citizen developers. So where in the past we've talked about how do you update your zoning bylaws for setbacks and fire suppression and what that might look like and building heights and allowances of that type and taxation. Now we're focused on empowering the industry and figuring out where we're going next. So rather than these policy talks, we're talking about who should pay for growth. How do we create an equitable DCC structure, development cost charges, so that it is more representative of the housing we want to see in our community, and it's a bit more equitable. We're going to be talking about modular and offsite and the challenges and opportunities that are associated with that, including from an Indigenous lens as well. We're getting into financial opportunities and legislation with private equity, with community bonds, with Van City as well. And they're going to be sharing some of their thoughts on that space. We have BC Hydro that's going to be a big part of it, because all of these homes are going to need to be pretty much electric, or let's call it decarbonized.
Sure.
So there's a big case study on the lessons learned, because developers and builders are having hard times with hookups there and ampage.
Yep.
So BC Hydro has some great lessons learned out of Vancouver that they're going to be sharing. So if you're, again, listening to this, or a builder or a developer, and you want to see where housing's going and how you can get in front of it, it's a definite must-attend event, and you get to listen to me rant a little bit longer.
In the sense of like the you guys call the citizen developer. I love that phrase. The homeowners out there that have this land that could create more housing in their backyard, front yard, depending on their house plan, side yard. Is there value for them in this summit?
There is, I would say, a little bit less so, truthfully.
Okay.
I think that they need to get that. This is really industry and supply focused, so that we can then enable those citizen developers. But they certainly stand to benefit. And if they're nerdy about where this world is headed and where the policy is going, they would certainly benefit, because there are going to be people from like the BC Land Authority there, and there's going to be banks there. So if you want to get some quick information about where to go next and how to start, it's still a good place to get valuable knowledge.
Okay. Andrei, I think we need to go to the summit.
Yeah, February 25th.
February 25th. And it's my birthday, guys, so we can celebrate. afterwards.
There you go. Are you speaking at the event?
I'll be speaking. I'll be emceeing.
Yeah.
And then if anybody, I don't know if you guys know the videos online, but Yute Lee, he puts out some fantastic videos about urban policy and where the stuff should go. He's going to be kicking off some of the session and releasing a new video while we're there. So it's going to be a fun sneak peek into that.
So over the next year, what would you say is kind of the objectives, like hard objectives that you guys want to reach with small housing and infill in general?
I want to see, in the next year, I want to see Plex building permits pick up. I want to see more Plex building across British Columbia, for me specifically and selfishly here in Kelowna and throughout the central Okanagan. And if I was able to dive into the data, although I don't know it's available, I want to see that being done by citizen developers. So Jamila, you've talked about your chosen family. We've talked about generational wealth, but one of the things that's missing in this, and one of the case studies you can find on our website, is about homes for the homies. So what four buddies finding a lot, building a fourplex, like that is a very viable situation for somebody that finds themselves in an oversized lot. I want to see more homes for the homies, guys. I want to see community living, and that's my own personal agenda and not the agenda of small housing. But it gets the ball rolling. I want to see old folks aging in place together, not in a retirement home. Like this is across the board. Everyone stands to benefit, and I want to get this message to as many people as possible.
Well, and you touched on aging in place. When you're building new construction, there is an actually aging in place policy that gives you the things that you can do in new construction, so that you can have your grab bars added in, you can have your chairlift added in, that is all ready for you. So you can create a home that better suits your needs as you're aging, and stay on your land in your neighborhood.
Well, yeah, and your kids are living in that main house like we talked about earlier, and then they can also pawn off their kids to grandma, right? Who's in the ADU. Like the social fabric, that at a time when everyone is so isolated, when we seem more opposed than ever and we're like on teams for politics, it's super weird.
Yeah.
I think gentle density is the thing that could actually bring people back together and create a tighter sense of community. Yeah, that's idealistic and utopian, and I admit that. But it's a real chance to rethink what a community is, how we use our space, how we live together. And if you're one of those people who says, if you want to make something great again, this is the way we're returning to the neighborhoods of old, where you do know your neighbors, you know your family members, and you feel that closer sense of community. I think that this is an elegant solution to the most complex problem we are facing right now.
Well, and it's hard to, like, people are now, like, you could be thinking strata, no, and that it's hard to have that community thing that you're talking about when you're in a 40-unit condo building with a strata. You probably don't know everyone who lives in the building, and you I mean, these days we keep our head down and we walk to our door, right? Or in a larger townhome, and then the only way you communicate with your neighbors is when they send you a bylaw infraction report because you left a box outside for too long. But when you've created a specific space with 4 units or 2 units or 3 units within your property that you've stratified or subdivided, that you now can, sell that to individuals of your choice to create your little community on your property, or you team up with business partners and you can create housing for yourself together. These are all wonderful new opportunities that people haven't even thought of before.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 3 other cases of whether it's generational wealth, gifting the lift, intergenerational families, and homes for the homies that we think this really lines itself well for. And I think everyone can find themselves in one of those buckets, right? Like I can think of 3 friends that I wouldn't mind living next to.
Totally.
And then what does that do? That adds better access to transit. It adds better access to community amenities because now shops are more viable. So I can have the grocery store, the doctor's office, the whatever. So this is really a chance to fix the urban sprawl that we've previously encountered, return back to our basics, and do what we said we were doing at the beginning, building homes like we've seen in Montreal, Boston, New York in the 20s and the 30s, and getting back to what made our housing a great, elegant solution in the first place.
I love it. Dan, thank you so much for coming. We definitely are going to have you back. I'm sure lots of people have some things they want to say about today. They can text us in. Andrei, where do they call?
250-862-2525.
Text us your questions. If you've got a property that you think you want to do something with, you don't know where to start, we'd love to chat to you.
Absolutely.
And standard text rates do apply. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat to you guys again soon.